What happens when country music royalty meets daytime television controversy? What happens when decades of unspoken industry secrets finally explode on live television? Today, we dive into the shocking confrontation that left audiences speechless and changed daytime TV forever. The morning started like any other at the View studio. The familiar buzz of pre-show energy filled the air as cameras prepared to roll. But nobody, and I mean nobody, was prepared for what was about to unfold when Reba McEntire walked onto that stage. Joy Behar opened the show with her usual smile, but there was something different in the air that day. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Queen of Country Music, Reba McEntire. The audience erupted in applause as Reba, dressed in a stunning burgundy blazer, made her way to the guest chair. Her signature red hair caught the studio lights perfectly, but her expression was more serious than usual. "Reba, it's wonderful to have you here," Joy began, shuffling through her notes. "You've been making headlines recently with your new tours, but I have to ask about the comments you made last week about the industry." Reba's posture straightened immediately. "What comments specifically, Joy?" "Well," Joy said carefully, "you mentioned something about how the entertainment industry has lost its way, how it's become too political. Some people are saying that's a bit rich coming from someone who's been in Hollywood for decades." The studio fell silent. Reba's eyes narrowed slightly, and viewers could see her jaw tighten. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about what I said." Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward from her position at the table. "Reba, let me jump in here, because I watched that interview 3 times. You said, and I quote, that entertainment should stay out of politics and that celebrities need to remember their place. That sounds pretty clear to me." "What I said," Reba replied, her Oklahoma accent becoming more pronounced, "is that we've forgotten how to entertain without lecturing people. There's a difference?" Sarah Haynes joined in, her tone diplomatic but probing. "But Reba, isn't that exactly what you're doing right now? Making a political statement about not making political statements?" "I'm not making a political statement, honey," Reba said calmly. "I'm making a common-sense statement. People turn on their TVs, they go to concerts, they want to escape. They don't want to be told how to think every 5 minutes." The tension in the room was palpable. Joy cleared her throat, trying to steer the conversation. "But surely you understand that artists have always had a platform. And with that platform comes responsibility." "Responsibility to whom?" Reba shot back, her voice rising slightly. "To you, or to the people who actually buy the tickets and the albums?" Alyssa Farah Griffin, who had been quiet until now, decided to weigh in. "Reba, I think what we're getting at is that your comments seem to suggest entertainers shouldn't use their voice for causes they believe in. Don't you think that's a bit hypocritical given your own history of speaking out?" Reba laughed, sharp and humorless. "Hypocritical? Let me tell you about hypocritical. Hypocritical is sitting at this table making millions of dollars and then lecturing working-class Americans about their values from your Manhattan apartments." The studio audience gasped audibly. Joy's face flushed red, and she leaned forward aggressively. "Excuse me, are you suggesting that we don't have the right to express our opinions because of where we live?" "I'm suggesting," Reba said, her voice now steel, "that maybe you should step outside your bubble once in a while before you decide what's best for everyone else." Whoopi's voice boomed across the table. Hold up, Reba. You're coming on our show, our platform, and attacking us personally. That's not okay." "I'm not attacking anyone personally," Reba replied, maintaining her composure despite the rising heat. "I'm pointing out that there's a disconnect. You want to talk about my comments? Fine, but let's talk about the real issue here." "Which is what, exactly?" Joy demanded, her voice sharp. Reba looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home rather than the hosts. "The real issue is that regular people are tired of being talked down to. They're tired of being told they're wrong for wanting entertainment to be entertaining. They're tired of having their intelligence insulted by people who think they know better. Sonny Hostin, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. Reba, I have to push back on this. Are you saying that speaking about social justice, about equality, about important issues, that's talking down to people? I'm saying, Reba replied, turning back to the table, that there's a time and a place for everything. And maybe, just maybe, people deserve to enjoy a song or a show without having an agenda shoved down their throats. The atmosphere in the studio was electric with tension. Joy's face was redder by the minute, and her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. An agenda, Reba? Fighting for human rights isn't an agenda. It's basic decency. And who decides what human rights are? Reba countered. You? The executives in Hollywood? The politicians you all seem to worship? What about the rights of people to think for themselves? Whoopi slammed her hand on the table, making everyone jump. Now wait just a minute. Nobody is stopping anyone from thinking for themselves. But when you have a platform, when you have influence, you have a responsibility to use it for good. According to who? Reba's voice rose, matching Whoopi's energy. According to your definition of good? That's exactly the problem right there. You all think you get to decide what's good for everyone else. The camera captured every nuance of the escalating confrontation. Joy tried to regain control of the interview, but her composure was clearly slipping. Reba, I think you're missing the point entirely, she said, her tone tightening. We use our platform to fight injustice, to help people who don't have a voice. Help people who don't have a voice? Reba's laugh was incredulous. You want to help people? Then stop treating them like they're too stupid to make their own decisions. Stop assuming they need you to tell them what to think about every single issue. Sarah attempted to mediate, her voice strained. I think what we're all trying to say, Reba, is that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Don't you agree? Reba turned to Sarah with fire in her eyes. And I think what I'm trying to say is that maybe your definition of injustice and theirs don't always match up. Maybe they're more worried about putting food on the table than whatever cause is trending this week. The studio erupted in uncomfortable murmurs from the audience. Joy was visibly struggling to maintain her professional demeanor. So you're saying we shouldn't care about social issues because people have bills to pay? That's a false choice, Reba. No, Joy, Reba replied, her voice now dangerously calm. I'm saying that maybe you should care more about connecting with people than lecturing them. Maybe you should try understanding their perspective instead of dismissing it. The commercial break couldn't come fast enough, but they were live, and there was nowhere to hide. The confrontation was building to something bigger, and everyone in that studio could feel it. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, her voice taking on a tone that every viewer recognized as a warning. Reba, let me ask you something. When you see injustice happening, when you see people being hurt, discriminated against, attacked, what do? Do you just stay quiet because it might make someone uncomfortable? Reba didn't hesitate. I help where I can, Whoopi, but I don't assume that my way of helping is the only way, and I don't attack people who might see things differently. Attack people? Joy's voice cracked with disbelief. Reba, we're not attacking anyone. We're using our platform to speak truth to power. Whose truth? Reba shot back immediately. Your truth? The truth according to your writers? The truth according to your network executives? Because I've got news for you. There are millions of Americans out there who have a different truth, and you dismiss them as ignorant every single day. Alyssa tried to jump in, but Reba was on a roll. You want to know what's really happening out there? People are turning off their TVs. They're canceling subscriptions. They're walking away from entertainment entirely because they're sick of being preached to by people who live in a completely different world. Sonny's voice was tight with controlled anger. So, you're suggesting we should just ignore racism, ignore sexism, ignore all the problems in this world just to make people comfortable? I'm suggesting, Reba replied, her Oklahoma drawl becoming more pronounced with each word, that maybe your approach isn't working. Maybe talking down to people isn't the solution. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Joy was gripping her note cards so tightly they were starting to wrinkle. "Reba, I have to ask you directly," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you saying that fighting for civil rights is wrong?" "Don't you dare put words in my mouth, Joy." Reba's voice was sharp as a knife. "I'm saying that turning every single piece of entertainment into a political lecture is wrong. I'm saying that assuming everyone who doesn't think exactly like you is evil is wrong. I'm saying that maybe you should try listening instead of preaching for once." Whoopi's voice boomed across the studio. "Listen to what? Listen to people who want to deny others their basic human rights? Listen to people who want to drag us backward? No, thank you." "There it is," Reba said, pointing directly at Whoopi. "Right there. That attitude. You just proved my point better than I ever could. Anyone who doesn't agree with you wants to deny human rights, wants to drag us backward. You can't even conceive that maybe, just maybe, there are good people out there who see things differently." Sarah tried desperately to find middle ground. "Reba, I think what Whoopi is saying is that some issues are just right and wrong, black and white. There's no gray area when it comes to basic human dignity." "And who decides what basic human dignity means?" Reba countered. "You? This table? Because I can tell you right now there are people out there who think their dignity is being attacked when their kids come home from school being told their parents are bad people for their beliefs." Joy slammed her palm on the table. "Their beliefs, Reba? If their beliefs involve hating other people, then maybe their kids should hear a different perspective." "Hating other people?" Reba's voice was incredulous. "Joy, do you even hear yourself right now? You just assumed that anyone who disagrees with you hates people. You just proved exactly what I'm talking about." The tension in the room was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. Whoopi was shaking her head vigorously. "Reba, when people vote against equality, when they vote against rights for minorities, for women, for the LGBTQ community, what would you call that?" "I'd call it democracy," Reba replied without missing a beat. "I'd call it people having different opinions about how to solve problems. But you'd call it hate, because that's easier than actually trying to understand why they think the way they do." Alyssa's voice was strained as she tried to maintain some semblance of civility. "But Reba, surely you can understand why people get frustrated when they see others voting against their interests, against their rights." "Of course I can understand frustration," Reba said, her voice softening slightly for the first time. "But I can also understand the frustration of people who feel like they're being called names and attacked for having traditional values. I can understand the frustration of people who feel like their voices don't matter anymore." Sunny leaned forward aggressively. "Traditional values? Reba, that's just code for discrimination. You know that, right?" Reba's eyes flashed with anger. "No, Sunny. That's code for the way you choose to interpret everything that doesn't align with your worldview. Traditional values, to a lot of people, means family, community, faith, hard work. But you hear those words and immediately assume it means hate." Joy was visibly shaken now, her voice rising to match her anger. When those traditional values are used to justify taking away people's rights, then, yes, I have a problem with them. And when your so-called progressive values are used to justify destroying people's livelihoods because they don't think exactly like you, Reba fired back, then I have a problem with that. Reba took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing slightly as she faced Whoopi. "Deplorable. I have a problem with that too." Whoopi stood up from her chair, something that rarely happened during the show. "Half the country, Reba. We're talking about people who literally want to take away voting rights, reproductive rights, marriage rights. How are we supposed to just sit quietly while that happens?" Reba remained seated, but her voice carried across the studio like thunder. You're supposed to try to understand why they think the way they do instead of demonizing them. You're supposed to have conversations instead of lectures. You're supposed to build bridges instead of burning them down. Build bridges with people who want to harm others? Joy practically screamed. Reba, that's not how this works. Some things are just wrong. And some things are just different, Reba shot back, matching Joy's volume. But you can't tell the difference anymore because you've been living in an echo chamber for so long that you've forgotten what regular people actually think and feel. Sarah made one last attempt to restore order. Reba, I think we can all agree that we want what's best for people. We just disagree on how to get there. Do we? Reba asked, looking directly at Sarah. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like some people at this table think what's best for people is being told how to think, how to vote, how to raise their kids, and how to live their lives. And if they don't comply, they get labeled as haters and bigots. The studio audience was completely captivated by the raw emotion and conflict playing out before them. Whoopi sat back down heavily, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. Reba, let me ask you something direct. Do you think gay people deserve the same rights as straight people? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Every eye in the studio was fixed on Reba, waiting for her answer. She took a deep breath, looked directly at Whoopi, and what came next would change everything. I think all people deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, Reba said, her voice steady and clear. I think all people deserve to live their lives without being attacked or discriminated against. But I also think that people have the right to their religious beliefs, and those beliefs deserve respect too, even if you don't agree with them. The studio erupted. Joy was practically vibrating in her chair. Religious beliefs? Reba, people used religious beliefs to justify slavery. They used religious beliefs to keep women from voting. You can't hide discrimination behind religion. And you can't dismiss everyone's faith as discrimination just because it doesn't align with your politics. Reba fired back, her voice rising for the first time to match the energy around the table. There are millions of people of faith in this country who love their gay friends and family members, who treat everyone with kindness, but who also believe that marriage has a traditional definition. And instead of respecting that complexity, you call them bigots. Whoopi's voice boomed across the studio. Traditional definition? Reba, tradition also said black people weren't fully human. Tradition said women were property. Just because something's traditional doesn't make it right. And just because something's progressive doesn't make it right either. Reba shot back without hesitation. But the difference is, I'm not trying to force my beliefs on anyone. I'm not trying to shut down businesses because their owners think differently than me. I'm not trying to get people fired from their jobs because they have different values. Alyssa leaned forward, her voice sharp. But Reba, when those different values result in laws that discriminate against people, what then? When those traditional beliefs become policy that hurts people? Then you vote, Reba replied simply. Then you participate in democracy instead of trying to circumvent it. Then you try to change hearts and minds through kindness and understanding instead of bullying and shaming. Sunny's voice was dripping with frustration. Kindness and understanding, Reba? How do you show kindness and understanding to people who want to deny you the right to exist? By not assuming that's what they want, Reba replied calmly but firmly. By actually talking to them instead of about them. By finding common ground instead of focusing on differences. But that requires work, and it's easier to just label them as haters and move on. Joy was at her breaking point. Common ground, Reba. What common ground is there with people who think certain Americans deserve fewer rights than others? The common ground, Reba said, looking directly into the camera, is that most people want the same things. They want their families to be safe. They want their kids to have opportunities. They want to be able to speak their minds without being attacked. They want to practice their faith without being mocked. They want to love their neighbors without being told they're doing it wrong. Whoopi slammed both hands on the table. But some of those neighbors are gay, Reba. Some are transgender. Some are immigrants. And when people vote to take away their rights, that's not loving your neighbor. Reba's composure finally cracked, her voice rising to match Whoopi's intensity. And when you attack people's faith, when you mock their traditions, when you call them names for thinking differently, that's not loving your neighbor either. But somehow that's okay, because you've decided your way of loving is the only right way. The audience was on the edge of their seats. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch that nobody had anticipated. Sarah tried one final time to restore some semblance of order. I think we can all agree that love and acceptance should be the goal for everyone. Can we? Reba asked sharply. Because it seems to me like love and acceptance only apply if you think the right thoughts and vote the right way. If you don't, then you're fair game for any kind of attack, any kind of character assassination, any kind of professional destruction. Joy's voice shook with rage. Character assassination? Reba, holding people accountable for their actions and their votes isn't character assassination. Holding people accountable? Reba laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call it?